Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Association Rock Stars, where we are learning from and celebrating executives and partners who are leading the association world to the future that we are hoping to see. And we have not just one, but two brilliant brains with us today, who a few months ago, had the pleasure of reading some of the posts they were making about the good work their associations were doing on behalf of their populations and their memberships. And there was enough intersect that I know the two of you are two times trouble anyways, that the idea of having you on the screen at the same time, I couldn't resist. And so thank you so much for being with us, both Christina and Lindsay. I'll have you introduce yourselves in a moment, but in our introduction that we are used to doing here, we often talk about how those that we have on the show have strengths or superpowers. And so we always like to know what you see as one of your own. As you think about what you bring to the table, how you are helping shape your organizations and this greater community. What is one of your strengths or superpowers? And Christina, you're in the top box, so I'm going to have you go first. You want to introduce yourself and tell us one of your superpowers.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Lowell, and thanks for organizing. I'm Christina Lewellen, and I'm the Executive Director of ATLIS, which is the Association of Technology Leaders in Independent Schools. We are a quickly growing organization that represents the CIO, tech director, tech teams at K-12 independent schools, mostly here in the US, few in Canada and beyond. I've been here at Atlas for 5 years, and the organization is only 10 years old. So it's been an interesting journey. I think that my superpower is probably remaining calm in a crisis, both at
Mm.
work and in my personal life with four daughters. So, generally speaking, when something gets really intense, I have been informed that I tend to be kind of level-headed, and I try to just tackle the fire in kind of the order in which it's flying at you. And so, I would say that's one of my superpowers.
I love that. We'll try to make sure, as much as possible, there's no crises today, but I promise
That would be
nothing.
good.
Lindsay?
Good day, everybody. I am the executive officer at the Council on Undergraduate Research. I have also been at my organization a little bit over 5 years. Our organization is slightly older. We're creeping up on 50 years old, which still feels pretty young for an organization. And I would say my superpower is leveraging my introvert. Some of you know me and would question that. And I think it's because I've really leveraged it as a superpower. And one of the ways I do that is the thing that is most petrifying to me is just walking into a ballroom and having to just meet people. And so I do everything I can to meet people before I get stuck in those situations. And I really, I think, leveraged it to my advantage to kind of know a big swath of the community and use that to help connect them whenever I can. So if I have a task in that ballroom, it's much better. And I think it's helped me and the community at large.
I love that. I'll be clear. I don't know there's any vert that loves the awkward walk into a ballroom who's not talking to someone. Can I elbow my way in and actually not be the person standing against the wall?
That's the
So
worst.
the methodology, I like the idea of walking in with the crew, but then hopefully being able to meet some new faces along the way. Well, I asked the both of you to table because you're both certainly amazing thought leaders in the space, as well as CEOs of small staff organizations. And I was just reflecting as I was watching my social medias that after both of your most recent conferences, you were just posting images and narratives around success in a way that I know many organizations are having some struggles around them. And so we don't need to holistically only talk about that topic, but I think that's where we wanted to start our conversation. And the two of you were so good, I think you even prepared a little bit for the conversation. So I'll turn it over to the two of you to help inform us a little bit about what you all did.
All right. Let's give us a moment as we get those slides up. This is another introvert, I think, superpower in action, right? Come as prepared as possible. Christina, you can hop right to that slide 4. That's going to give you a little bit of overview of Kerr. As I said, we're just shy of 50 years old. And we're in this really interesting space as an organization where we are serving multiple generations all at one time. We serve from college students to senior administrators at colleges and universities. And so we are trying to engage a wide swath of types of individuals that have different engagement interests and platform types. And so that is one of the things we are constantly juggling, testing, piloting, all the good things. We have a board of 13, a staff of 8 in a decentralized workplace. So there is no main office for us. We come together about 4 times a year. Our revenue is based on majority membership, events, publication, and professional development for our community. Many of our members are introverts, but one of the things we're really cognizant about is that they do love to present and connect with each other, and they need to justify often coming to our events and paying for that professional development. We're also in a great place where we have a mix of longtime attendees and community members, and those really brand new to the community. One of our fun opportunities is that we cover all academic disciplines. So we are covering everything from the arts and humanities to the deep STEM, and getting all of those folks to engage with each other. And so that's kind of what we try and tackle. We have 2 meetings a year. One is based primarily for faculty members, and we run somewhere between 300 and 600, depending upon the year. And that is both virtual and in person. And then we have a huge in-person event of about 4,000 students that come and present their research each year. You can go to the first slide. Thank you. So one of our approaches, and this is not just unique to our events, but since we were using that as a prompt today, is that we wash, we rinse, and we don't repeat, which means we do the meeting, we make sure that we are keeping track of what is working, what is not working, and we don't repeat anything really, right? The event location is always going to be different. The time zone is always going to be different. The time of year sometimes could change. The people are never going to be 100% the same. And so the meeting should never be 100% the same. And I will say that does not mean we're doing large scale changes every year. What we are trying to do is constantly tweak our events and measuring the impact. What worked, what didn't work. We are constantly, we have a Teams chat channel, but we also have a Teams note channel that we are taking live notes on site. So not waiting for a team debrief and hoping we remember all the things. Every comment with a member or an attendee, we're keeping track of it, right? To see if there's any kind of consistency across the team. And what it does help us do is continue to evolve the event, but it also keeps our attendees from getting so attached to a delivery mechanism, right? That it doesn't make it so we can make change or do something different, or there's no kind of golden handcuff to a specific delivery channel. And that's one of the things we really are cognizant of. And part of that came from a prompt from a strategic plan item we started about 5 years ago, which is accountability and sustainability. And to be sustainable, we need to continue to evolve. And we take this really seriously with all of our events. You could go to the next slide, Christina. The other thing we're super cognizant of is everybody feeling as included as possible. And one of the places we really recognized that was having some impact on our events was around food and beverage. And so one of the things we try and be really cognizant of is ensuring that when anybody comes to one of our meetings, they can eat just like any other individual there, that they are not othered because of what they need, or they are not hangrily going around our meeting because we couldn't serve them. That does not mean we have large food and beverage budgets. We don't, but we work very closely with the locations that we have meetings, and we try and be as creative as possible. It's really important to me personally because I have been at plenty of meetings where I haven't been able to eat, and we actually get really positive feedback from our members about the attention we take to food because it does impact their experience. Like I said earlier, we don't really do everything the same twice. And part of that is because every city, every ballroom, every environment is not created equal. And we really try and customize the event to the locations, right? When we go to the West Coast, we can start a little bit earlier because it's the later for our East Coast attendees and our West Coast attendees are there. When we are on the East Coast, we try and be really cognizant of not starting, anywhere before 9 a.m. Anywhere before 9 a.m. is an ungodly hour for your West Coast attendees. Do not have a 7 a.m. breakfast. They're going to be cranky or they're going to miss, whatever content you're putting out there. So we really try and constantly tweak those things. And like I said, every ballroom isn't the same. Last summer, we had this really cool division open house. So our divisions represent all the academic disciplines, and we happened to be in an event space that had 13 alcoves. We gave them all customized spaces. They could all do their own things. Well, guess what? We're not going to have that space next year. We're going to have to rethink that event. And we're focusing on the interactive piece of it, right? That's the goal hasn't changed, but we're just not going to plug and play that event into the next space. Next slide, please. And the other thing we really try and think about is while we are trying to support and prompt the change in the profession, we really want people to leave our events with immediately implementable solutions. And so one of the things we've really tried to incorporate is space in every one of our meetings to have conversations about what is keeping people up at night at that given time. It allows us to have kind of right in the moment learning, on-demand learning. It allows them to build community and really feel heard and supported at their own meeting, even if they're not the presenters. And I'll hand it to you, Christina. Oh, apologies, outcomes. Sorry, this is the most important part. Our survey feedback, again, over the last 3 years since we implemented this kind of nimble approach to our meetings has improved. Our registration has increased year over year for the last 3 years. And we've really been working with our local event partners to customize our experience to those event locations. And we found like those partnerships, we've been able to figure out, oh, this event space has 13 alcoves. This event space, they've done X, Y, and Z. And so really working with our locations to customize the event has really been beneficial. Now it's yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll also give you guys just a kind of a quick overview of my association. As I mentioned in the beginning, ATLIS is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. In 2025, we'll be in Atlanta, and we're growing fast. So that definitely puts a lens on all of the decisions I make because I have a difficult time predicting how big my event will be in 5 years, for example. We are a board of up to 15 people. I have a staff of 7. We're entirely decentralized and working virtually. Our diversified revenue comes from membership events, professional development, and this year we just launched a brand new certification program that has been successful beyond kind of our imagination. So I'm thrilled about that. What we find in terms of our planning and the way that we think about our events is that our members, who again, they may be at a school where they have a tech team of, let's say, 4 or 5 or 8 people at the most. Often you'll find that a smaller independent school might just have one tech person that leverages contractors and outsourced solutions. And so our members, we find our attendees tend to operate on an island. They're alone. And so when they get together at Atlas conferences, there's a party to be had because they're just so relieved. You can always, my staff and I can always kind of tell when a glazy-eyed person sort of walks into the event for the first time and we're like, hey, is this your first time here? And they're like, yes. And they're so relieved to have just found their other people. But we are not old enough where there's a way we've always done it, which of course allows me and my team to be flexible. And I have to give a shout out to my team because without my incredible creative staff and a board that will kind of just roll with it, I think some of these changes may have been difficult, but I just don't receive a lot of pushback because I'm lucky that we have a great team. So one of the things I tackled when I came in is that I had inherited this feeling that because these other larger organizations in the independent school space were having their events in larger cities, my organizers and founders and the people who originally kind of set up our event sort of thought, well, we have to be in big cities too, and or we have to remain in big cities for a couple reasons. One being that maybe we should keep up with the other organizations in our space. The other being that if you're in a highly populated area, especially on the coasts, that's where many of the independent schools in our country tend to exist. There's not a ton of independent schools, for example, in Phoenix or in the flyover states. And so having them in a larger city kind of made sense on the surface. But as we started looking at our strategy for sourcing, first, I knew that I just needed to get them to buy into an experiment and try maybe a secondary tier type city. Um, and so the way that I did this and the way I presented it in the early days was, what if we did a top tier, secondary tier kind of a rotation? Top tier, secondary, secondary, top tier, secondary, secondary. And that would mean that every third year we would be in a more populated area, maybe a city that's easier to get to, but also knowing that it was going to be more expensive. So as you heard, I mentioned that we're going to be in Atlanta this year for our 10th anniversary. So this is the end, as I'll give you the I'll give you the ending of the movie, is that this is the end of our top tier strategy for now. Originally, we did the top tier secondary as kind of a dipping our toe in the water. What happened was that as soon as we went to secondary cities, the board and the organization and the attendees recognized that even though they had to get on two planes to get there, once they got there, we were able to do the full rollout. Like, we had our budget dollars went a lot farther. The hotel venue tended to be a lot less expensive, so they could bring more people from their team. And then of course, the bottom line really benefited, and the board saw that as a growing organization, we have a high priority on making sure that we're saving enough for our future. And so they saw the profit margin in some of these secondary tier cities, and that ended up being like, okay, we're good now, we like this approach. And so while we will be in Atlanta this coming year, the next round of sourcing, we went entirely with kind of that next tier down level city. And I know, by the way, there's a lot to juggle here, including that cities, it's tough to source. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Lindsay and I have both had some challenges with sourcing this year, so we'll save that for after I get through this fun stuff. So when we talk about kind of bringing our people together, being in these less expensive venues, we really looked at ways for how we could kind of leverage the spend. Because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I go to an event, I think to myself, why did they spend money on that? Right? Like, you only have so many dollars. Even if you're at a larger organization, we all have limited resources. And so where you spend that money is important. So one example that I have is that when I first started at Atlas, I had about 6 months of normal life before the pandemic. And in that 6 months, as a new CEO, I was flying around and visiting with my board members and visiting their schools. And one thing that I noticed is every time I went to my board members' offices, I noticed that they had all of the Atlas badges hanging on the wall. They saved them. And so when I came back and, you look at the budget and how are you going to make everything work? I realized that our badges do not get thrown away. And in fact, they're sort of looked at as like a collector item. And I also heard this language among my community members where they'd be like, oh, well, I wasn't at the first one. I missed LA, but I was definitely in DC. So they sort of mark their own careers, sort of like we sometimes do at ASAE, right? Like, remember when ASAE was in Nashville, right? And so we remember our life events or where we worked at the time, where our career trajectory was, or what committee we served on based on where ASAE was that year. And I recognize that in my members as well. So it's silly, but I make sure that we spend money on badges. Like I know that they are going to hang in our attendees' offices for the next decade. So I want our branding to be on point. I want their names and their titles to be correct. I want, vendor recognition on the lanyard. So that might not make sense for your organization, but it absolutely does make sense for us. The other thing is that these folks tend to, they work at private schools, so they will walk down to the dining hall and they'll get a tray and eat their food off a tray, off a buffet line almost every day. So it was important to me that when they come to Atlas, sometimes plates are put in front of them. We have a luncheon where the meal is actually placed in front of you. You do not need to stand there in a buffet line scooping your own potatoes. And we spend money when we're in these secondary type cities. We'll do the full 10-foot long charcuterie board and the sushi tables and the branded donut walls, because that type of thing really speaks to our members and makes them feel important. So I try to put the money where the impact is. I also will say that we have started, rather than thinking about our vendors as being like an extra or like a buffer to the budget. I come from a publications background, so I recognize the importance of non-dues revenue streams to associations. We think of our vendors as partners and we treat them. You cannot just call them vendor partners. You actually have to pull them into your organization, make them a part of it. So I feel like where you place your vendors really matters. If you stick them down a dark hallway or in a separate ballroom, you're not they're not going to feel the love. What we try to do is pick venues that allow us to have this open concept where the general session barely ends before the vendors begin, that it's all just one big room if we can handle it, if it fits. And we try to make sure that our vendors are a part of the event. We do not have, quote, exhibit hours, traditional exhibit hours, but we certainly don't have them during meals. Like we want our vendors to come sit down with us, break bread with our members, and be a part of the community. And while we do have tracks that they can pay for if they want to, get a room and control the content, cool, they can do that. And we're not going to turn that away. But at the same time, we also mix them right into our sourcing and speaker selection process so that if they want to present, they're interacting with more of our members on a daily basis than probably we are. So we try not to shut down our vendors and make them feel othered, like Lindsay said with the food. We try to make them a very integral part of the community and they feel it. And by the way, I hear all the time how much our event stands out in a very crowded independent school space. We're the only association serving tech leaders, but there are a lot of state, regional, and national events, and our vendors really love working with us. They feel celebrated and empowered to interact with our attendees. And I don't think we're going to have enough room for them this year. I think we're going to have to sell out. My team has already upped the budget twice now in terms of what they expect we'll make this year on vendor partnerships. It's pretty impressive. If you put the effort into the relationship, they'll put it into you. Okay, couple things. One of the things I always remind my staff is that we have to remember that our annual events, while they suck up an inordinate amount of energy and time at our associations, it's really important that you know your number. And by that, I mean what percentage of your attendees reflects your entire membership community. So that's important because in a lot of organizations, it's less than 10%. So if you have a membership of, you know, 10,000 people, how many are actually coming to your conference? It's important to keep that number in mind because you can easily convince yourselves that the association's annual conference is the thing. And yet, if only 10% of your people are coming to it, is it the thing? So the way that we try to mitigate some of that is to look in for ways to kind of bring the conference into the rest of the year. We find that we do that via podcast. We'll book a great speaker as a guest on our podcast, or we'll do like a best of annual conference series where we ask folks to re-present. Don't just record it at the conference. That doesn't work for our people because they want to ask questions. So what we do is we ask the speakers to represent the content and welcome live questions from the broader community. And the other thing I'll do is just, share stories about the people. So just because you celebrate your award winners or your 40 under 40 or whatever it is, just because you're celebrating them while you put a chicken dinner in front of them does not mean you've made the impact that you could. So we look for ways to celebrate our people more broadly beyond just the annual conference award dinner, if that makes sense. My outcomes, my conference registration is booming. My overall revenue is booming. And that is why I start by saying we're growing fast. So I do not pretend that these methods will get you a 90% increase in your overall revenue. But I can tell you that it makes a big difference that we're managing it, because it would be real easy to get complacent and make the same old conference planning decisions that everybody makes in the association space. But instead, my team remains diligent. And really focused on driving that profit margin so that we have a sustainability fund that we can invest in for our future. I did just sign several years of more affordable secondary tier type cities. It was a hard fought battle, but these contracts I signed with, I didn't want to get too far out in front of my skis. I signed them in what would be conservative growth projections, but I made sure that the venue had more space and the hotels had more rooms, so that if in a couple years I've grown wicked fast, I can go back and negotiate my way through some additional blocks. So that's kind of how I thought about it. And that's that for now. So now I'll just kind of open it up and give it back to you, Lowell,
Yeah.
and see what some of the questions are.
Well, we've had a few different comments in the chat as well as a question or two come in. I'm going to start with one, and then Ben, I see yours in the Q&A. I'll go to yours next. Both of you mentioned sourcing as a place of, Christina, something you just did, but you did differently. I know beforehand we were talking about that wasn't easy right now. And a few of the comments we've gotten on the side is that small, medium organizations are starting to experience some greater challenges when it comes to sourcing. I was just wondering if
Yeah, it's
either of you had
brutal.
any reflections about that, what you're experiencing or why.
Yeah, I will not. Lindsay and I know, are both huge proponents of having a third party sourcing partner. I'll leave it at that. You pick them, pick which one you like, talk to people you trust. But I would not do this on my own. And it's foolish to do so, honestly. I mean, I hate to just like throw it out there, but like, if you're trying to do this on your own among a million other things you have going on, there's always dynamics that you're not able to track. And so having someone whose head is in sourcing full time as their income revenue or income generator, it's really valuable. And so I highly recommend that you get a partner, even if you have a full-time meeting person on staff. Like, don't be dumb because the market is changing so fast. And what really helps is that they have the perspective to kind of negotiate not only on your behalf, but in comparison to other clients they have, right? So they know and can tell you this seems fair, or this is too much, you're asking for too much, or the ratios are off. There have been plenty of times through this I did a heavy sourcing effort from like the summer on. I really wanted everything signed by the end of this year. And I would say that half the time, there were weird things that I've never experienced in my 20 plus years of sourcing that I was like, am I crazy? Like, short of like going to Reddit and posting, the am I the crazy one post, I needed somebody in my corner to just say, like, am I crazy for asking this? Like, what has happened? So things are really weird and different. Linz, how do you feel about what
Yeah,
you're
I
going?
was I would say, right, like even if you have a meeting planner on staff, their expertise is planning a meeting, not sourcing a meeting. Those are two different skill sets. So maybe you have a sourcing person on staff, highly unlikely if you're a small staff. Even if you're a large staff, right? Highly unlikely. So let them focus their expertise on the outcome for your attendees, right? And really, again, I agree. Third party external sourcers are totally the way to go. And there's lots of different financial revenue share models and that sort of thing. If you think you're a small staff and it can't be accessible to you, I would say that's probably not true. Um, and not only like are they navigating the industry, but they are in all of the cities right now, right? And so they know what cities are capable, what they're delivering on meetings, what the experience for attendees looks like in that city. They want you to have success in that city. So they are not going to point you to a city where you're going to have safety issues without you being aware. They're not going to point you to a city where, the quality of the attendee experience isn't going to be high. And those are things that, we keep talking about are critical to the success of our events, because it's not just, oh, your members aren't going to say, oh, I had a bad time in XYZ city, but next year will be better, right? They had a bad time at your meeting. And that's not how you want them to walk away. And so having that expertise in your corner and that negotiating power, which is much larger than you have alone as a small staff, I think is really powerful. I will note the other thing that we started doing is we have a smaller meeting and a larger meeting. And what we've been doing is booking a city for the smaller meeting a year out from the larger meeting. So our staff is more familiar with that city. We've established a stronger relationship with those vendors there. And it's just a better experience for everybody because we're not just in and out. It's a longer term relationship with that city. And so we've also noticed that the service we get, because they know that we're coming back, is, hands down different.
This is a 2-second question. Hopefully we just get a quick answer. For the vendor partner relationship building, is that done at the CEO level in your organization, or is there a dedicated staff to work with that third party source?
Yes, and
Yeah. We break it up. I do. I'm still responsible for the contracts because I think for an organization of my size to take that much fiscal responsibility and put that much on the line, you need to be involved in it. So I handle contracting, and then I have somebody on my staff who handles kind of like the logistics of the event, and then someone who's more in charge of the content of the event, and then I have basically it's a whole team effort. But I still take point on the sourcing because it's that important.
yeah, I think, it's not just meetings, right? Everything is a whole staff effort at an organization of our size, or at least that's just our strategy. We're not a particularly siloed organization. Everybody has some kind of role in the event experience. And so everybody has some kind of role in that. And so I think to Christina's point, again, I'm the one taking the risk and signing the contracts and putting my name on the line for those pieces. But for the most part, it's a shared piece, right? Our marketing person has a say in the city and how we're going to sell it. Our events person has a say in how we're going to line up the ballroom or the order of operations, right? So we all are engaging in those decisions and the experience at the event.
I want to thank Haley for that question. Ben and Heather, I'm going to combine your two questions in a little bit of a way. As you think about, both of you talked about doing virtual elements or sort of ripple effect elements to your conference. Has that approach changed post-pandemic with the rise of AI? And any commenting you about how you price those elements for members or not?
Yeah, I mean, well, let me say that we lean into using AI and leveraging AI. How could we not, right? Because we represent technology leaders, and they're helping our schools navigate this for our learners and our future workplace folks, right? And so we absolutely lean into that. It doesn't really affect our approach right now in that by the way, the only thing I won't let anyone use AI for is our certification program. Like if we're writing test bank questions, I'm concerned about the IP there. But everything else, I mean, it's not like we prohibit it in your conference submissions if you want to be a speaker. Like, dude, leverage it. We also leverage it at Atlas. So what we will often do, as simple as it sounds, is we'll take, let's say we do a webinar like this, we'll take the transcript from it and run it through AI tools, and we'll create listicles or articles or social media posts. And so we really use AI in a lot of creative ways to make sure that that content gets out to as much of the membership as possible. And in some cases, there's that quote loss leader approach, which is let's get the information out there so that we pull people into the Atlas community. We're only 10 years old. Not everybody knows who we are. So if we drop something that goes viral on social, and it pulls people into the Atlas community, that's a good thing. So we absolutely we haven't really changed our strategy, and I guess we're a little bit more liberal because I don't think that like associations can really keep a hold on content the way that we used to. So the whole put it behind a member wall, it's just not going to work for us. So I think that we have to bring value in other ways. And for us, it all boils down to content and community. And we really focus on bringing the community together and being super quick and responsive. One example that I won't go deep into, but we have a, let's just call it like an audit where schools can kind of use this product to sort of audit how they're doing tech wise. ChatGPT was 1 month old when we had added elements of generative AI that schools ought to consider and probing questions that they need to answer. So we're not the kind of association that's going to send something off to committee for 6 months. We had stuff, we pulled together 10 thought leaders on a call next week, reissue the document. It's out into the world, literally less than 30 days later. So we look at AI as an opportunity to move faster and respond to our members.
Christina, I will add to, right, anybody that thinks they're not experiencing AI or their members aren't using it or their members aren't going to be exploiting it, like you just should be assuming everybody's using AI for everything. Now, they might not be, but just assume they are. That's kind of our approach. And even for our submissions, that sort of thing, I think we're just, at least in the academic space, ensuring that people are noting when they are using it, but we are encouraging people to use it and currently are using it as a lifesaver for a staff of only 8. I don't know how else people are organizing their materials or anything else if they're not putting it into AI to do it for them. So I think that's true. I think same for us, the content that gets reposted or reshared as a webinar after the fact, it is free, right? Most of our webinar content is a way to have community-based conversations. It is not just about pushing the content out. And so like how we view that content is really as an engagement channel. It has not kept people from coming to our meeting. Our meeting attendance is still growing. The purpose of the meeting is the content end, right? And so we just see it as, a secondary delivery channel.
We got a question from Heather about expo floor challenges. Where you're trying new things, there's always the concern about traffic, about actually getting attendees together with exhibitors. Just wondering, in your methodologies of always experimenting and trying new things, how you have found that that connection where people don't want to be sold to as they're walking down an aisle, but you want exhibitors to get the feeling that they're, and the reality that it's profitable for them to be there.
I mean, ditch the bingo card. I'm not a big fan of the bingo card. But I mean, I get that we're all just trying to get folks there. But I think if you think about it, one of the things that I do as the CEO is I stand up on the stage in the opening session and I stop for a minute and I pause and I say, y'all, this event would cost a ton more and we would not be able to offer you the products that we offer you without these vendor partners in the room. Talk to them, they're here for you, and I think that part of it is I also make sure that I work with the vendor partners. Like, don't send me your cheesy sales guy, send me your tech people, like, meaning I have the tech people at my conference. So we've warned our vendor partners. We're like, look, if you want to make the most out of your Atlas experience, don't send the sales guy. You really need to bring the technical people. And what we found is that by having the vendors in the room with us, in the space with us, whatever that space looks like, and by helping our community understand the role they play in helping Atlas grow, we don't have issues. I mean, I can put sushi tables out and they want sushi. They'll stay for the sushi or the free drinks or whatever. But really, half the time they don't eat because they're in the booth talking to their technical connections at the companies and they forget to go eat. They're just visiting with friends and visiting with their reps. And so I think that, again, just pull them in, make them a part of your community rather than a bingo card to be checked off.
I think to that point, Christina, too, right? Stop calling it an exhibit hall. Like if you don't want them to be exhibiting and you want them to be partners or solution solvers for your community, call it something else, right? Reestablish what the purpose of it is. And some of that will take time and a lot of conversations with your vendors. But again, Christina keeps calling them partners. We do the same, right? But until you change the verbiage and the structures around which you engage with them, your community is not going to engage with them any different either, because you are setting the tone of that relationship between those vendor partners or exhibitors and your members, right? And so are you educating your members about why they're there, how important it is, what difference does it make? And then are you, educating your vendors about what your members really need from them there, and then finding spaces for collaboration, right? If you want them to collaborate, does it need to be more than just a booth? Does it need to be educational sessions? Does it need to be conversations? Like, what does that look like? I will say, right, we have two different meetings, right? One is with students and one is with faculty members. They are way better with the students. They know how to do it. So it is possible. And so just rethinking, those dynamics of those relationships and spending time with those vendor partners, not just a sales call, but what is the educational content you're giving to your vendors as well is really important.
And if I could just add one more thing to be even clearer about this relationship, I love what Lindsay is saying. When I'm on stage talking about the value that they bring, I don't just say, y'all, the value they bring. I actually have a number. Everybody knows what the number is in your organization. You know how much your vendor partners spend. So whether it's 100 grand or 200 grand, how hard would it be for you to actually just come up with a slide that shows that if we did not have our vendor partners, here's the 200 grand in value that we would not be able to offer you? And so put things out there and say, we wouldn't be able to do this. We're small, we're growing, we're here for you. But without the support of the folks in this room, we wouldn't be able to do this program and this program and this program. So if you value these programs, you've got to make sure that you're visiting with your vendor partners and make sure that, look around. If they value Atlas, they value you.
Well, Christina, I'd add to that too. Are you teaching them how to engage with your vendors, right? Like, when I go to ASAE and I'm looking for, a tech vendor, right? Do I know how to search the exhibit hall? Do I know the purpose of it, searching the exhibit hall? Is it about relationship maintenance? Is it about finding new relationships? Do your attendees know how to experience an exhibit hall? That might be an educational piece in a know before you go, in a, something like that. But just assuming they know what to do at an exhibit hall is actually us failing them. If they are a newbie at a conference, there is so much to take in. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to experience an exhibit hall. And so that's part of the professional development beyond just the content of whatever your event is, but how to professionally attend a conference and why those vendors are there and how to establish a relationship. Even if you're not looking for a vendor right now, you might in 5 years and go back to this person. So teaching them those skills.
Feel like I want to have a separate conversation, Lindsay, especially as you're a self-professed introvert. Before AC next year, we're getting you back on for 15 minutes on the 15-minute crash course on how to be an introvert and successfully navigate a conference of thousands. Everyone, I think, would love that. I have one more question as our time's starting to wrap up. That's not true. I have the closing question of your final piece of advice, but one question before that, which is, both of you talk about being able to work in this nimble space of constant evolution and how that's been a real boon and benefit to what you've been able to create. And I'm just curious about, I see many organizations where leaders who like to be part of the planning of conferences, or presidents who, this is my year for my conference, right? Try to have these like traditions, right? That it's like a place of, I don't want to say power, right? But certainly ownership. I'm just wondering if there's anything you can comment on from a leadership culture perspective, that in your methodologies of planning these things, with sort of looking to ever evolve, if you've hit any places of leadership culture intersect that have been interesting. Either of you?
I would go back to, right, I work with academics, so language is really important to us, what you name things and how you charge and structure. One of the very first changes I made was going from a conference planning committee to a knowledge advisory group. And their job is to be the subject matter experts on what content we bring to the conference, not how we deliver it, not where we deliver it, not what napkin color it's going to be on. That's not their expertise. And it is actually a much more rewarding experience for them, right? They want to have an impact on the industry. They want to show their knowledge. Sure, if you ask them what color napkins that you want, they're going to tell you, but that is a choice. And it does take time to evaluate that change. But but simply just naming the committee something different. The other thing is we now make it so you cannot sit on that committee for more than 1 year, right? It should not be anybody's conference. It's the community's conference. And so it needs to constantly have fresh content, fresh people, fresh contributions, and it allowed for a lot less control and year over year requirement of keeping a single event if the person's not still there.
Yep, I+1. I love Lindsay's advice on that front. I also think that this is an opportunity to coach up to our boards because, we have the opportunity to coach them down the path of what they should do at conference. I make sure that I don't assume my board members know what to do at conference. This is not like the
Agree.
chairperson's prom. Like this is the industry's event. And so with that, I try to make sure that I give them guidance on the events they should be at, what their roles are at each of those events, where they have an opportunity to make a difference and make people feel included, how they can help Atlas advance our mission. Depending on what's going on, it might be, hey, I really need you guys to be with these vendor partners. This is a big, we want to lock them in for next year. Or I really need you to be at the Women in Tech event, and my board members will be there and be a part of it. And so, I think helping them understand what their role is can help some of that. Like, it's my year. That's not our vibe at all either. And I think that that really does a disservice to the entire membership. Though I think we should celebrate our volunteers. So I don't want
Yeah,
to in any way discount that.
perfect. Time flies when we're having a good conversation. I'm going to ask each of you in a moment just sort of a closing piece of advice of those listening in, if they were going to start somewhere with this idea of being able to take a fresh look for their conference and events, what would be the place to start? For everyone who's still with us that's listening in, if you want to put in the chat one thing that you're taking back from today's conversation that you feel you can implement at the organization, we'll then get a piece of advice from everyone who's here. Christina or Lindsay, who wants to go first?
I think we talked about site selection a lot, and that is hard because it's so far into the future. You're often booked. Don't wait to start booking different and better venues, right? Because you can't control today, right? Really be thinking about that. But also pick one thing, right? What is one thing you don't have to get board approval for or isn't going to need, all kinds of red tape? Pick one thing and figure out how you're going to celebrate it post success, right? I think that's, for us, we're in the control seat. I recognize there's a lot of privilege in that. I can do a lot of things without having to get anybody else's approval. You all might not be in that space. And so pick the one thing you can control and try and make some change there.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I would also don't ever underestimate the value of just calling something a pilot. You can change anything and just call it a pilot program. It's an experiment. And that's how I was able to go to non-top tier cities. I said, look, what's the worst that's going to happen? We'll experiment, we'll get the feedback, and then we'll have data. So I would say approaching an event, a first place to start is if you had to start the new event today, like wipe the slate clean. And if you had to start this event from scratch right now, what would you keep? What would you bail on? And also just always keep in mind that your entire membership is subsidizing this event, even if they don't attend. So what I always keep top of
Mm,
mind, my team keeps top of mind, is that the attendees are not paying your salary. The membership is paying your salary. And so with that lens, what should we spend our time on? How much time should we spend on this event? Because it's easy to get sucked into the vortex of conference planning for 6 months. I don't have that luxury. As an organization growing as fast as we are, I refuse to buy into that kind of antiquated thinking. We're going to knock this event out for the 10% of the people who will come, and we will not lose sight of the other 90% we're here to serve.
so many amazing, brilliant points from both of you that could be whole separate conversations. Every time I speak with you, I learn something. Thank you both for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and expertise with our community.
Happy to.
Thank, thank you to everyone who joined in. Send us your invitations to all your amazing new events and conferences so we could see all the fun customized donut walls and non-traditional exhibit halls that you design and implement. We look forward to hearing the brilliant ideas that you come up with as well. Thank you as always for being part of the Association Rockstars community. We will have one more in December, a best of the year, where some of our rock stars from throughout the year will come back for a group dialogue and conversation. Wishing everyone who's watching this live just a few days before Turkey Day a thankful and happy and healthy season to all. Until next time, Association Rock On.